It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk boxing, and we've got a lot of boxing to talk about with you guys. We've been away for roughly a month because of the holidays, and so much has happened in that space. So we're going to fill y'all in. But first, let's check in with our leader over here. John, how the hell are you? And how were your holidays?
Good. Holidays were good. Happy New Year. Happy we all made it to 2024. I guess we'll lay the odds to make it to the next year, but I had a good holiday. Hopefully you had one too.
I sure did. Absolutely. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in and take the nasty plunge here. And I want to talk about this rumor of Top Rank being for sale. And not only that the UFC is looking to buy it. I want to get your overall take on that rumor, and I want you to tell me why the UFC might want to buy them and why they might not want to buy them.
Well, first it should be noted the rumor comes from Rick Glazer, who is how do I put this kindly, notoriously known for not have inside information most of the time. So he's got a few things right. He announced, or I guess he broke the news or whatever, that Showtime would be closing its boxing department. Actually, the whole network closed, but he called that right. So he got that right. But he's made announcements and statements before that ended up not panning out. So I would take this with a grain of salt that they're buying. The rumor too is it's not UFC that would be buying Top Rank; it would be Endeavor. So there's been rumors for years that Endeavor has thought about getting into boxing, and we know about Zuffa Boxing, the announcements that never went anywhere. So it doesn't seem that unrealistic. But again, I would put that I would have a caveat that the source is not 100% trustworthy.
We had Dana White come out and say that this is categorically untrue. But we saw him say the same exact thing in 2016 before the UFC sale became official, when everybody heard the rumors and all the media outlets were talking about it. He came out and did the same exact thing. This is categorically untrue. So when you look at this, do you think there's a chance?
I mean, I think there's definitely a chance because, well, one, as you note, if Dana White denies it, that's no evidence that it's true or not. He has repeatedly said stuff in the past that ended up being the opposite. I remember when he said Tito and Chuck were definitely going to fight for the third time after that Ultimate Fighter season. Mm-hmm. And Tito ended up being injured. So, I mean, he has just a long list of statements like that. But there's a lot of stuff that says it could be true and not the inside information. One is we know that Top Rank's been for sale for years. Bob Arum has come out publicly and talked about selling a portion or the whole company. We know that there's an Endeavor has had some interest, some discussion with looking into boxing. There was some look and some talk a few years back with PBC. We know that's true. We know that it makes some sense for them to acquire a boxing promotion Endeavor because they've developed this department that can sell media rights and sponsorship for pro wrestling and for MMA. A boxing brand could take advantage of that too. So you have a similar sport but different that you could go to the same people and try to sell more material for. Also, boxing serves, especially Top Rank, is on ESPN, and that's an alternative to MMA on ESPN. So it would give you more leverage in your negotiating for TV deals. So all this stuff, Endeavor buying a boxing promotion or acquiring it or doing something makes sense because they could really take advantage of the machine they built for the UFC. And for pro wrestling to sell sponsorship and broadcast rights, and basically bring in more revenue for a boxing promoter, and also use them as leverage for the other stuff. But just as much as it makes sense, there's some things that tells me that it doesn't make sense. And one is that boxing, the big hit against boxing, the margins are really low. the margins, you have to pay the boxers a big percentage of the revenue. And so you don't make much profit. And that's probably unappealing, as we've seen it from Endeavor's business model with PBC Wrestling, with WWE and UFC, is they look for things where the athletes don't make much money and that they can get high profit margins. And so boxing would be against that. So you'd be like, is it worth having a sport where you make a much smaller percentage instead of a large percentage? Your EBITDA would now shrink because of this. Your margins would. And on top of it, several people have told me before that Endeavor has been worried in the past that one of their primary concerns, and this struck me as kind of didn't make sense to me, but people have said this, that Endeavor is always worried that if they acquire a boxing promotion under the same roof as the UFC, then they're worried about the expansion of the Ali Act to MMA. And the theory would be that you would have a direct comparator under the same roof. And people, that would lead to people questioning, why is this not being regulated the same way when the same company is running both almost identically? I mean, that's their strong. I could see the reasoning if the UFC was buying Top Rank or TKO, but the one thing that makes it possible that they aren't concerned about anymore is you could have the UFC under TKO, a separate company now, and then Endeavor could have Top Rank. So that makes it seem like maybe that's a possibility that they're now kicking the wheels, of a boxing promotion, because the idea is as long as we've moved UFC to TKO, it's no longer the risk it was before.
What about the timing? Because we have this lawsuit coming up, the antitrust lawsuit coming up in April. Could this negatively impact them if they were to purchase? Would it be a bad look to the jury, to the judge, whatever?
I don't think it would be entered into evidence, because it would be considered a different promotion, especially if the UFC is now in a separate entity under TKO, and this was done under a different umbrella as part of the sports operational group under Endeavor. Then you'd have some separation. If the TKO bought Top Rank or the UFC bought Top Rank, that could look bad. Probably not for this case, but the future one, because you could do a direct comparison of why you have this different business model that pays different amounts, right? But as long as it's Endeavor, if it was Endeavor that acquired them in Top Rank, and it was the UFC was still under a separate company now, because they moved them off to TKO, then I don't see a problem, because they are, even in the case, they argue that boxing and MMA are two different marketplaces. And so you really you can use it as a yardstick comparison. And it makes, if it's under the same roof, the same company, makes the yardstick comparison more likely. I guess that's one threat risk, is if you want to make a yardstick comparison for the next lawsuit, the Johnson case, because we've already got all the discovery done for Lee, you would have this. You could go look right in the books of Top Rank and say, hey, how come you're paying Lomachenko this much, but your star attraction of your pay-per-view in the UFC gets 1/3 what he's getting, 1/4.
What about broadcast partners? Like if they were to get Top Rank, because we just saw PBC, they were in a precarious situation there for a second when the news came out that Showtime Sports was going away, their whole sports division, boxing, everything. But they ended up landing with Amazon. So if UFC were to get Top Rank, obviously they're with ESPN right now, but how long would that last? Like, do we know the length of the contract Top Rank has with ESPN right now?
Yeah, though I believe, I'm going off memory, I believe it runs through August 2025.
So we're in the situation right now that the UFC is in this year with ESPN in negotiations. So they would be approaching that towards the end of this year, right? They would want to start.
And also, that's where it kind of makes some sense if you could bundle them, because you give a lot more negotiating leverage, because your two entities that draw combat sports fans and kind of serve the same purpose are up at the same time. And so if you own both, you could use them both against ESPN. Like you have to come to a deal on both of them perhaps, or you lose both of these.
Now, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. What about Golden Boy? Could they possibly be in the running for the UFC to snatch up if they wanted a promotion maybe not as expensive as Top Rank? Because to me, it seems like Golden Boy really only has Ryan Garcia right now. And just the other day, I saw an interview with Oscar De La Hoya where they asked him, have you squashed the beef between yourself and Dana White? He says, there is no beef. I have no problem whatsoever. It almost seemed like he was falling all over himself to make sure the air was clear. So could Golden Boy be a viable option for the UFC? Would they even think about looking that way?
I could see Golden Boy being up for one because they are somewhat struggling, but I don't think they'd be as enticing a buy because for one thing, Top Rank has an incredible library. That's one thing they've kept and curated and stuff. They have this great library of classic boxing matches that is, I think would be, fight if you're Endeavor, UFC fight, putting the library that has all those Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, and all Ali matches and stuff on the on Fight Pass, right? That's valuable to them, that alone. So you got that going for them. You also have a roster and the relationships, the co-promotion relationships Arum has put together with like Inoue and Frank Warren and Fury. So you have this roster of just a lot of stars where if you look at Golden Boy, it's, Ryan Garcia is by far their biggest star. And he's got one foot out the door with them because he doesn't seem to get along with Oscar at all. And then what you got, Jaime Munguia. And, it's a huge drop off. They don't have much in the way of star power. And even up and coming talent. So, I mean, you could if you want to. I don't know what the price that depend on the asking price, but I don't know if it'd probably much lower than what Oscar would want. And is it worth acquiring it instead of just building your own promotion at some point, right? Because you're not really. What are you getting with that collection of boxers? Not many.
Right. So let's switch gears here because the other really big boxing news that came out, and it just came out yesterday, was that Francis Ngannou will be fighting Anthony Joshua. The tentative date that's out right now is March 8th. It's going to happen in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Let's talk about Francis Ngannou getting that damn bag again. You said something really funny to me yesterday when we spoke privately about this. You said Francis needs a bigger bag to put all the other bags in. And I love that. So talk about the bag that Francis is going to get from this.
Well, I think it's going to be mind blowing to a lot of MMA fans and other fighters and stuff. There's a good chance people have been talking. In fact, I'm sure that Forbes is looking at it seems likely there's a good chance if this fight goes through, there's not an injury or anything calling off, that he makes the Forbes top 50 athletes this year.
Wow.
Because he made, over 10 million, not people are like 10 million only. He made over 10 million. I don't think he made over 20 million, but sometimes somewhere in the teens of the tens of millions for 10 million for against Fury, that first fight. And he's going to make more than twice that for this. So you're looking at over 40 million combined with for those two boxing matches, because his price with that performance against Fury has actually created more demand for Ngannou, right?
Yeah.
He didn't have as much leverage before. Now he has much more leverage, much more interest. And in Saudi Arabia, apparently they really like him, want to put as part of their heavyweight roster. So he is going to be making, and then you throw in whatever additional, it's funny that sponsorship is so exaggerated by fans now. It's like the new locker room bonuses. Whenever a fighter, you don't think he makes much, he made millions in sponsorship, but Ngannou probably makes a few million in sponsorship, not like other athletes, but a few million in sponsorships over the year. But he's going to be right on the cusp. Maybe won't make it, but he's going to be close to being on that Forbes list. So he's got a massive bag. And if he does good and this fighter wins, oh my God, the next payout's just going to be just insane. I mean, we are crossing, we're going to be crossing biggest, highest paid fighters in the world type territory. Not the highest, but he'll be up there in the top handful of people. And if he wins this match, or even if he has an incredibly good close showing, because it sets up another fight, then he still can have the Fury rematch in the on the table, or even I guess if Deontay Wilder beats his next opponent and Ngannou has a good performance, you still have a big fight there. I mean, there's just tons. There's tons of potential options for him as long as he doesn't look terrible in this fight. So,
I mean, he looked fantastic in the first fight, so I don't think we're going to see anything but fantastic from him.
Yeah, I think he's caught a lot of people off guard at how. I mean, people forget he entered MMA wanting to be a boxer.
Yeah.
And yeah, you might say, oh, his boxing and MMA looks terrible, but that's because it's also MMA, and he brings attributes to boxing that really translate, I think. And he's a quick learner. And I mean, you gotta favor. And this is not off the money subject, just on the fight. You gotta favor Joshua just because the experience and what he's demonstrated. But Joshua's not the favor over Ngannou that, Ngannou has a serious chance in boxing where McGregor, I gave no chance.
Never did. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Now, since you brought up McGregor, I have a question for you. Let's say that Conor McGregor only fights presumably at International Fight Week. We'll say he fights just once this year. And we'll say, we'll make it fair. We'll say that Francis Ngannou only fights once this year. That he'll only fight Anthony Joshua. So if he's looking at somewhere north of 20 million and maybe a few million in sponsorships, we'll just call it 23 million and we'll just call it even at that. Conor, I don't know what he would make. But if you were to look at the two of them, could it be possible that Francis would out-earn Conor McGregor?
Yeah, I think it's very possible in fight purse. Now, if we exclude, because there's all the business enterprises McGregor has.
No, I'm
advantage.
Just talking fight purse. Yes.
What they make in the fight. Yeah, in fact, I think if you look at the numbers that people are suggesting, and you total up. Ngannou is going to get more than 23 million. I think if people want to put a ballpark number, I think it's going to be more of 25 million, maybe around 30 million.
Okay.
But you look at the numbers, we don't have exact numbers for McGregor, but we know that he exaggerated in the past. We can kind of make we have some evidence because we see the amounts the fighter pay, how much it's fluctuated in their notes on the SEC filings based when he fought. And it seems like he had 2 fights one year with Dustin Poirier, and that added about 33 million, I think it was, to fighter payout that year. And so you assume Dustin got, so you're thinking he's somewhere probably for a big fight in the 15 to 20 million dollar range for Conor McGregor. And so that would say Ngannou is the higher paid fighter right now per fight basis.
That's exactly what I was going for. Obviously, Francis has a little ways to go to reach the kind of global celebrity that Conor has. But from a financial standpoint, we could potentially see Francis bigger than Conor.
Yeah, on the financial side, this is the strange thing because Conor McGregor is a much bigger crossover star, well known to the public, and a lot of the traffic we get on Conor stories blows up, but a lot of it's not fight related. There's an interest in him as a fighter, but there's also an interest in him just as a bass or a train wreck right now at that point of his career. And so there's so much more interest in that, but on what they can make in the ring and in the cage, because McGregor is signed to the UFC and the way the business model works, and he's not, he doesn't have the option of getting out. There's a definite cap on what he can earn. Even if he draws more, even if he sells more pay-per-views, there's a cap. With Ngannou, though, just the Joshua fight, he's going to make a ton. But if he does good and it sets up a bigger fight, the sky's the limits because there's no promoter there taking all the money. He gets to negotiate and keep all the money.
Yes.
And so if he wins, so even right now where it's, we could have a debate who's going to make more in the next fight. If Ngannou looks good and he moves on to another boxing match, this argument might be moot because he's going to make in fact, if he wins, if he knocks out Joshua and sets up a Fury rematch, I mean, there's a possibility that he will surpass what Conor got against Floyd Mayweather, because even though the amount that the UFC Zuffa boxing took in for that Floyd fight is probably impossible for Ngannou to match over 100 million. Remember, they took a big chunk of that.
Right.
And so that's a strong possibility that if Ngannou can win this fight match and set up a massive Fury rematch, that he could be in the rematch, make more than any MMA fighter that went into boxing ever made.
Wow. Let's talk about Saudi Arabia for a second, because here again, Francis will be fighting in Saudi Arabia. And it seems to me that Saudi is putting together these mega cards and just getting the really good stuff over there. So first thing I want to ask about Saudi is, are they directly paying Francis? Because you said, I want to go back to something you said, just a few minutes ago. Saudi really likes Francis Ngannou. So is the lure coming directly from His Royal Highness, or how does this all work?
Well, the other prince, whose name I can't, Ariel Hawani brought up. I can't remember that guy's name right now.
Okay.
He's the guy of the Turkey El Sheikh, I think his name is.
Yes.
I'm just trying to go off memory. And
Right.
Hopefully I didn't screw the guy's name up. He kind of oversees the boxing operations, and the team he has apparently is, they've earmarked Ngannou as their major, one of their major guys they're going to be invested in. I don't think he has a multi-fight deal. He might with this fight. He might now have a multi-fight deal with the Saudi government, the promotional entity that runs their boxing. Mm-hmm. But he's not working. He's not signed to like Matchroom or signed to Top Rank. He'll be signed with them. And so he has that benefit that he doesn't have to worry about a promoter taking a cut. And he can negotiate on other fights as well. I mean, the thing I'm looking forward to, and I think this has been their plan, they've talked about it over and over again. If he does good in this match or wins it or can kind of force a rematch, I think the next bout they want to try doing is in Africa, which is not probably with Saudi Arabia's, plans, but they would do it separately, but they would do it on the 50th anniversary of the Rumble in the Jungle.
Oh, wow.
Some opponent, because I mean, the promotional, the free publicity that would garner would probably help you sell a ton of pay-per-views.
Yeah. If
you have the right opponent and stuff. So, but to get back, Saudi Arabia, they have a promotional arm they've set up, and they are intent. And it seems obvious they're mostly focusing on heavyweight boxing, and they're going to have a bunch of huge events with multiple fighters on the cards. I think that's somewhat of a mistake by them. If I was them, I would sign guys to contracts, but then like maybe do 4 big cards per year in Saudi Arabia, but then promote events in London and the United States where you're going to get more media attention for those same boxers, then bring them in and out of Saudi Arabia.
There is a rumor of Naoya Inoue going to Saudi in May.
Yeah, they're talking about him, and they had Haney was there negotiating, and Conor McGregor's talked about fighting in Saudi Arabia, and Jake Paul fought there. So there's some non-heavyweights. The big, they want big events, and he's a monster. Anyway, he's a monster star, so that makes some sense. But the heavyweights seem to be their focus. Like they can control just that division. And there is the old saying: if you control the heavyweight division, you control the sport.
Wow. Talk about site fees. How do the site fees work there in Riyadh?
Well, we got kind of different information because originally when Joshua first started the big events there, the word was that they were paying just a straight sum just to have the event there, and then they got to retain the broadcast rights. Now Saudi Arabia, they might have done that just to entice them there to get the people to dip their toes, or they might have been kind of naive about how the business works. But now they're asking for more control where they own the broadcast rights and then they sell or get a piece of them. So the way it works is they pay a large sum, and it's a large sum. It's lucrative to fight in Saudi Arabia. Now, I think some numbers you hear people throw out are inflated, but going off, the good thing about like Anthony Joshua has his own company, you can see how much he makes every year. Mm-hmm. Same with Matchroom. So you can kind of see what he got from his fight in Saudi Arabia. And he made more fighting in Saudi Arabia, but it was probably like 25% more than he would have normally than instead of 2-3 times as much as some people imagine. But the benefit there is it's guaranteed money. You don't have to worry about selling. You don't have to worry about the ticket sales bombing or the pay-per-view bombing. You have this just lump sum, large guaranteed amount of money there, and then you can sell the pay-per-view on top of that. So the Saudis, I mean, talking to people too involved in their recent events, they make sure the boxers get a very large guarantee, and there's an upside, just not as the upside starts at a high amount. Let's put it that way, because you're getting such a large guarantee from them.
How long until Saudi takes over the rest of boxing?
I don't think they will take over the rest of it. It'd be a bad business plan, because it would probably kill the interest in the sport if everything was done in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
You don't have live, but they'll definitely have a say in heavyweight boxing. That's why I also think it's a mistake by them to try to hold all the heavyweight bouts in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Because you're kind of, without the media going there all the time, it kind of kills some interest in it. I think you would build up more interest by having an event in Saudi Arabia and then having an event like, in New York with the major two guys, or in London, and then bring them back for Saudi for the next one, where you could build, get the fan base in those countries excited for the matches. Because the good thing about Saudi Arabia involvement, as long as you look past all the horrendous human rights stuff, the good news about Saudi Arabia is they are getting these people to fight and fight regularly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we were talking about site fees there, and
I'm sorry.
The notorious ones, Anthony Joshua commended them both. I believe one of his fights, the site fee was around $40 million, and then one of the Ruiz fights, it was $70 million.
That's the one I think grossly inflated, because we can look at the numbers, and it looks like it was somewhere in like the $40-50 million range for the Andy Ruiz fight. Right. And we know they're paying a lot. They're paying a ton for site fees, because look, they're paying the UFC $20 million for a fight night. Now it's probably going to be better than a regular fight night, but that's still $20 million for a fight night. United Arab Emirates, their neighboring countries, paying $25 million for pay-per-views for the UFC.
Insane.
Yeah,
I saw Australia paid them $16 million in site fees.
Yeah, for 3 events though.
But still, that's a lot for Australia.
That's a huge amount. And same with Utah.
Their exchange rate is shit, like Canada's exchange rate for us. So that's a lot of money for them.
That's a lot of money, but it's not. I mean, but for one event on a fight night, $20 million, which would be the biggest gate you've ever had for the UFC.
Yeah.
Think about it, that's bigger than their New York gate, and you paid it just for a fight night. That's they have money to spend. Part of me says Saudi Arabia, I hear from a lot of people, they're very smart, very, that they pay attention to the books. They're not being taken advantage of. But the other part of me says these are the guys talking about building a city that's just one line. Building a ski resort in the middle of the desert. I mean, it's like, yeah, they might be smart on some things, but other things sounds like they're just blowing money. They have money to blow.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's all of my questions. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
To that? No, I'm trying to think. There's so much that happened over the break.
There really is. The big thing for me though was the Francis news. Also we got to see Gervonta Davis converted to Islam and is now Abdul Wahid.
But isn't he keeping his name professionally though? I
am not sure.
That's what I heard. Gervonta Davis he's going to keep professionally. But I don't know if that's true.
I'm not certain on that. I'd have to do a little investigating. But yeah, I mean, I just can't get over Ryan Garcia pulling the bait and switch though with Devin Haney.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about before the show that I thought it was smart by Garcia, but it is like you got us all. Everybody got worked up over that bout, then you switch it. But I think it actually sets up a bigger fight. You can marinate that fight if he can beat if he can beat Rollo first.
Yeah, Raleigh. Yeah.
Yeah. If he can beat him, we've got a bigger fight potentially because of title unification on the line and stuff. So, but it's setting up. I mean, we got also, do we have official date? I mean, I know it's supposed to happen, but I've not seen any like promotional work or anything for that Usyk Fury fight that's supposed to happen next month.
Right?
Makes me a little nervous.
Also, the rematch clause on that makes me a little nervous too, as to like when will Francis get his shot at a rematch?
Well, you seem to be jumping ahead of the fact that he's going to beat Joshua there.
Yeah, I know, but you know,
Well, it's a rematch that kind of sets. If you do Usyk Fury in February, then have a rematch of the summer, that kind of works out because in March you'll have the Joshua match, and then I'm just waiting to see. I guess the question is Ngannou ever going to fight for PFL?
I don't think so. My personal opinion is that man has already changed careers, and that's it. PFL got to be sweating bullets right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked to other people about this, and I mentioned it. Part of me wonders that PFL's plan is not so much to even have Ngannou fight in the PFL, because that's a large amount of money they got to pay him, that they don't have an opponent that can draw enough to justify the payment.
And then they got to pay the opponent too.
Yeah, and they the same thing with Jake Paul. They have Jake Paul under contract, but he's not. They've not had a fight for him either.
Amanda Serrano too.
What's that?
Amanda Serrano too. I imagine that she has to have a fairly beefy payday being a champ coming over.
Yeah. So my thinking is almost that they have them on the contract so they can go to investors and point out they have these big stars, but they don't actually have to pay them fight.
Maybe.
Which would be a clever ploy, but it doesn't help them put up big fights. Isn't that right? Isla's here to get her input on the match here.
For new listeners, Isla is John's cat.
That's I'm hurting. I'm not really my cat. I'm just a human that does stuff for her.
They have a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, I did not get a say in ownership here. So, but she just already jumped on. She's taking her position on my lap, so I'm stuck. Sorry if the audio's bad. I can't put my face in the right position because I am stuck in a certain position now. But yeah, the problem is they know. And here's the other crazy thing: people will say that Ngannou is choosing boxing because boxing pays more. Mm-hmm. And it does pay more, but it doesn't pay more inherently, because if he had a huge opponent in MMA that could sell a lot, he would make just as much in MMA. The only reason MMA doesn't pay as much is because there's no way to put a big fight that can generate the revenue to pay him, because he has a contract that would pay him very much like a boxer, a huge percentage of what the revenue is.
Yeah,
and so that.
True, but the biggest fight would obviously be with John Jones in MMA. And we're never going to get to see that. And further, I mean, a lot of people are out there, the UFC got to be hurting, the UFC this, UFC that. UFC don't give a shit. They have a machine. They don't need Francis.
They don't care at all. Actually, it's kind of interesting because you had a thing, and I was going to comment on this, but I think the Isla interrupted my comment. But when you talked about, does the UFC still build stars?
Yeah.
And Google Trends isn't perfect, but if you set go to Google Trends and set it just to sports, so you don't get all the the non-sport stories involving the athletes, the trends, and you punch in the fighters, you'll see that the top guys every year, that the Google Trends, the trend lines were going up for the beginning from like Rampage, Chuck Liddell, Tito, Randy, Rampage, BJ Penn, then GSP and Anderson Silva were higher, then Brock was higher than them. And you keep going across the board, and then you get to Ronda and McGregor, and they're the highest. But since then, it's been going, and Khabib too, it's been going the reverse. The star power has been receding. And
by design.
It might be very much. They are not making the stars that they did in the past. The personalities, we have personalities, and you have guys trying to be personalities, but nothing like the crossover appeal or the general fan interest that you had in the past.
That's right.
And and we see that too with outside the UFC, because if you go back, you'll see Google Trends will show there was interest in Nick Diaz, and there was interest especially in Fedor Emelianenko. People that didn't say he have a star. He was next to Brock. He probably was more interested in any heavyweight until John Jones now, and Fedor Emelianenko back then. Mm-hmm. But now you look at guys outside the UFC, and it's like, except for Francis and Nate Diaz leaving, it's a flat line. You can't register those guys on Google Trends.
Remember when Andrei Arlovsky was a huge star? I mean, he was. in his early UFC days when he had his trilogy with Tim Sylvia, he was a huge star. When he left in late 2007, when he left, holy shit. I mean, it like broke the interwebs there for a minute.
Yeah, when he actually 2008. Remember, he had that fight in 2008 on the prelims against
We're Doom, where he was like posted up on him and was
no, it wasn't Verdum. Remember, he fought kind of a wrestler on the prelims of a UFC event. His last fight, he already fought Verdum. It was his last. He'd been frozen out for 12 months. He got his last fight. Oh God, I want to say Jake O'Brien, but that's not it.
Hang on, I'm gonna pull it up here.
You pull it up and you'll see it's the fight right before he came back, and then he fought.
It must have been right after Verdum, but that was a horrible fight.
Yeah, and then he fought Ben Rothwell in Affliction right after that.
Let's see here. All right. It was Jake O'Brien.
Yeah. Oh God, I should trust my gut.
Yeah, it was Fabricio in April of 2007, and then in March of 2008, it was Jake O'Brien. Then he went to Affliction.
They famously froze him out and starved him, and finally, we have actually the antitrust. We have a letter from his lawyer to the UFC that you have to give him a fight, otherwise he's a free agent right now. And that's the last. They gave him a fight against a tough wrestler. Actually, a lot of people picked Brian to beat him or give him a bad fight, and they put him on the prelims so no one could see it. So they could that way, if he won, they don't have to show it. If he loses, because remember back then they could take a fight and put it on the broadcast, the dark matches. If he lost, and they could put it on for everybody to see. He won, and then he signed with Affliction. I fought Ben Rothwell, then Roy Nelson, and then Emelianenko.
Man.
But yeah, it was a big story back then.
It really was. And he was a big star because he was good looking and he had the fanged mouth guard, and he was he was this big Russian, and wasn't he former Spetsnaz or something like that?
I don't know. I can't remember what that was but I do know that was wasn't that
I know Krokop was a former cop, but
yeah,
I could
Sergei
have sworn
Karatonov was the special forces guy.
It was Karatonov. But
but Arlovsky, God, we're going back to 90% of people listening don't even remember this era.
Arlovsky was in law enforcement too.
Was he? Probably, yeah. I can't remember that. I remember he had remember he cried cried uncontrollably when his dog died.
Yes, I remember.
I felt bad for him. Mm-hmm. He's like never getting a dog again. He couldn't put up with that again. The heartbreak.
Yeah, his dog was Maximus.
Yeah, but he got. Back then that was a huge contract with Affliction. I think it was $500,000 plus per fight, and then to fight Emelianenko was I think it was $1.25 million plus if he won, he would have got $500,000.
Wow.
So. You got to give it to him, though. Here he is 44 and he's getting ready to fight again, and he's making six figures every fight. Yeah, I had a comment on Twitter with Zane Simon about that. Yeah. I actually don't like it because I would like the fighters to make as much as possible as they're moving up the ranks, and especially when they're at the very top, just make a fortune. Kind of like what we see in boxing. And then when they start getting older and downhill, the money disappears. So you have you built the wealth of security, and now you can retire. I don't like the idea that we keep paying guys, the fight well past their prime to take more damage just so they can get the extra income. I wish they would have made a ton more during their prime, and then the money's just not there when you're no longer good. I'm not a big fan of MMA paying guys that are way past their prime. Probably their highest purses at the end of their career when they're beat up and can't really. We don't want them to. We don't want to give them. We don't want to do anything to entice them to stick around well past their prime, but we seem to do that. Yes, we do. But anyways, all right. So that's going to wrap us up officially. Y'all got some spitball conversation there at the end and a lot of valuable information about boxing at the beginning. So, John, what do you have coming up? Tell us what you got. I got to go open a toy for Isla. We didn't open for the holidays. So I got that. I got a bunch of articles actually that should be out next week or the week after. We're going to look at Bellator's finances. We have another one on a breakdown of the revenue that events made. This is from the antitrust lawsuit evidence exhibits that came out. The revenue that an event came and how much money fighters made on those events. That's another article. So I got both those, and then I'm on Tuesday nights on If the Shoe Fits with Lexi Old and Eugene Robinson.
And you'll be back here week after next.
Yeah, week after. Pen it in sometime, whatever date. You call me and tell me, and I'll be here.
All right. So there you have it, folks. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Do me a favor, follow this guy on Twitter. He is, guess what, at Hey Not The Face. You can follow me at Crooklyn MMA. Both of our DMs are open. So if you have questions, comments, or suggestions for topics, please let us know. You can find John. He's heynottheface@gmail.com. If you prefer to email him directly, I am crooklyn949@gmail.com if you prefer to email me directly. So from here, y'all already know the drill. Until next time, please stay safe.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!